The Carolina Panthers head down to Houston for joint practice and preseason game number 2 with the Houston Texans. What should you be looking out for this week? I'll tell you right here on Locked On Panthers.
You are Locked On Panthers, your daily Carolina Panthers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, the part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Julian Council, talking Carolina Panthers with you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and yes, of course, Friday, your team every day. That's our motto here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for watching the show right here on YouTube and listening wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter at Julian Council. Also over on Blue Sky, also at Julian Council, because starting on Wednesday, September 3rd, heading into the week 1 matchup against the Jags, the weekly Wednesday mailbag is back every single week throughout the regular season and potentially the playoffs here for the 2025 season in Carolina. In the meantime, you can either at me or DM me over on Twitter at Julian Council, or at me also on Blue Sky at Julian Council. If any questions, any thoughts that you have pertaining to your Carolina Panthers. And speaking of the Panthers, they headed down to Houston on Wednesday as they prepare for joint practice on Thursday morning. And then on Saturday at noon Central Time in God's time zone, they will have their second game of the preseason against the same Houston Texans. And to break down what's potentially going to happen this week down in Houston on Thursday and on Saturday, John Harris. He is a football analyst for Houston Texans radio and television. Also is a sideline reporter for them throughout their game broadcast on the radio and then throughout the preseason on television. An old friend from back in my time being in Nashville covering the Titans AFC South world back then. So hit up John, ask him to come on the show and to give us his perspective on what's gone on so far with the Texans during training camp, his thoughts on their season heading into this year 3 of DeMeco Ryans and Stroud, and then to get his overall thoughts on what he's expecting to see and what he's going to watch this upcoming week on Thursday and on Saturday at joint practice. So here's John Harris from the Houston Texans coming on right now here on the Locked On Panthers. John Harris, he is a football analyst for the Houston Texans on their radio and Texans TV. Also can check him out on the sidelines throughout the season. Follow him over on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at J Harris Football. Does a great job covering the Houston Texans, and glad to have him on the show. It's been a while. Back when I was covering the Titans in Tennessee, would have him on all the time to get the Texans perspective, and now look at how it's brought us back here as the Panthers and Texans going to have joint practice on Thursday, then their second preseason game on Saturday. John, good to talk to you, man. Been a long time.
It has been, man, but I'm glad we get a chance to catch up. I'm glad the Panthers are coming to town. This being Wednesday, we're recording. They'll be sometime in the air today, land tonight, and then be ready for 95 degrees. Nice, cool day here in H-Town. We went up to the Greenbrier for a week, and it was amazing to step out. And it's like, man, I got a hoodie on, man. This is wild. I can't believe this. So it was It was a good time at the Greenbrier, but get back to work, and it's gonna be good to have Carolina here. Really excited to see what they're bringing. I think for the Texans, there's a lot of questions about the offensive line. So facing a defensive line that's got some size, has some athleticism. It's a different kind of front. I think that's really where my eyes are going to be, just watching the big guys inside and how this new offensive line can handle itself against a 3-man front like the Panthers are bringing. So it's going to be a good day and a good test for that unit for sure.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think for both teams, there's certain expectations. Now, Houston winning division the last couple of years with DeMeco Ryans going back home. Stroud has been a revelation for that organization, where there was some questions posed to Sean what y'all were going to do at quarterback. And for Carolina, Bryce Young, big year 3 for him and CJ, close friends. Year 2 of Dave Canales, and a lot of changes have been made this offseason to get that defense back to the standard that Carolina has been used to over the 30 years of existence. But, man, you talk about the weather. It's been raining here almost every day. And Brad Idzik, who's the OC for the Panthers, actually did mention on Tuesday after practice that they're looking forward to the heat and humidity of Houston, not just because, okay, it's great to finally see the sun, but they're not getting some of the kind of conditioning that you need for the season that you typically get in Charlotte when it's hot as hell, which has not been the case. But let's just look at the Texans holistically, man, because back when I was in Tennessee, the Texans had Deshaun. They were in a good spot. Then you had what happened with Deshaun no longer being there. You had the Lovie Smith, the David Culley years, and then you bring back DeMeco, you get in CJ. And for a period of time, like I was talking to Panther fans being like, you could have had that. Like DeMeco Ryans could have been someone David Tepper could have talked to. For the people I've talked to, DeMeco wasn't interested because he looked around and saw, yeah, that guy probably doesn't actually want me to be his head coach. And then with CJ, well, we'll never really understand who Frank Reich actually wanted. But just looking at it heading to year 3, where do you see this organization heading into 2025 and just some of the strengths and weaknesses that they have?
Well, it's amazing you bring up DeMeco Ryans. Thankfully, when DeMeco was a player here, he married a beautiful woman from the Houston area. And so when the idea of coming back home, so to speak, was kind of, placed in front of him, he jumped at the opportunity. And I know Denver was really, they wanted DeMeco as well. And he told Denver, like, look, Houston is, where I'm looking. And I thought it was a smart move at the time, because what really did he have to lose coming back to Houston? I mean, he was so highly thought of as a player. He was coming into a situation where if he just won 6 or 7 games the first year, everybody would have been happy with that. But instead, we kind of got a little bit of a hot streak. We beat the Bucks and the Bengals in back-to-back barn burners, and everybody's like, hey, we got a shot to win this division, or at least get into playoffs. And then it was like, man, the Jaguars are starting to tank at the end. Man, maybe we can go win this division. We get a little help from Tennessee, and we got that help. And, of course, beat the Colts that week 17. I think getting in the playoffs that year was huge, so that these guys experienced what that was like. What was it like to get in playoffs? What was it like to play big games? What was it like to play in primetime? In 2023, we played 16 straight games at noon. At noon. And it was weird. In a sense, it was great because you could get in a routine and all that. But finally, we played a primetime game, and everybody got a chance to see what 7's all about. Nico Collins was like, hey, man, it was kind of a revelation for people around the country. Now people are drafting Nico high up in their fantasy drafts. But this is a team that's continued to add really well through the draft, but also supplement with free agency. They went out and they drafted Will Anderson Jr., but then they signed Danielle Hunter. And they put those two together, and it was about as good as it could be. In this training camp, they've been together about as dominant as you could possibly be. But last year, they ended up trading their first-round pick to go get Stephon Diggs eventually. And so, it was working, but then he gets hurt. There's nothing you can do about it. He tears his ACL running a curl route, and he's done for the year. But in the second round, they get Kamari Lassiter and draft Kamari Lassiter. And everybody had kind of backed off because he ran a 4.6 at his 40. And Kamari came in here, and within a week of being here, they're like, we love this guy. This guy's going to be a player. And in camp this year, you could argue Kamari Lassiter's been the best Texan that we've had. So they've had a lot of success with the draft, even not drafting in the first round. And this year is going to be another test of that, because they traded out of 25. They picked up additional draft capital, which allowed them to move up and draft Woody Marks, the running back. They went and got Jaden Higgins, who they were going to take at 25 anyways. And Jaden Higgins has been a revelation along with his teammate from Iowa State, Jalen Noel. So this rookie class has got an opportunity to add to what they already have, because now we don't have quite the cap room that we had. And so we couldn't go out and get a bunch of free agents. And so these drafts had to work. And so last year was Kamari Lassiter, Cade Stover. They really stepped it up. This year, there's a chance for these rookies again to make a big move, including Ariante Ursery, who, Julian, right now might be our best offensive lineman. He has yet to play a regular season game, who came out of the University of Minnesota, and he's an absolute stud. So he's going to get a nice little lesson, but hopefully he can dish some out as well as he faces the Panthers on Thursday and Saturday.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to hear. I know there's been a lot of change on the offensive line this offseason for Houston, and to hear that Ursery is possibly, and at least in your opinion, their best offensive lineman right now, that may not bode well, but we'll see, because he's got a massive body. I remember checking him out week 1 when North Carolina played Minnesota on that Thursday night.
That's right.
And, I mean, he was nails in that game. Everybody else on the offensive line kind of struggled, but not him. So very curious to see how that plays out. But going and looking at camp, because you brought up some names there. I know you guys were up in West Virginia at the Greenbrier. You're now back home in Houston, having to deal with the elements. What's been this biggest storyline of camp offensively and defensively, in your opinion, for the Texans?
Well, I'll start defensively. I think it's just been the continued wrecking of shop of Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Yeah. And if you wanted to, kind of a sub-chapter of taking Will Anderson Jr. and really kind of making a case for a potential defensive player of the year. If you're one of those types that likes to go to that one city out in the West Coast and, take money out of your pocket and give it to other people and put a bet on something, Will Anderson Jr. might be one of those kind of dark horse, defensive player of the year candidates. The way he has gone through camp, he has taken over as the alpha in this building. Like everything runs through Will Anderson Jr. and then the offensive side, CJ Stroud. And that's exactly why that trade made so much sense on draft night, Julian, because people were talking about, well, why'd you give up so much? The Texans are going to suck. They just gave up another top 5 pick in the following draft and went through all this. And I said, yeah, but I said, think about what you're getting with Will Anderson Jr. You're getting a great player. You're getting a guy that's going to be the face of the defense, and you're getting the alpha and the elite talent that they hadn't had in this building. We did not have elite talent. We just didn't. We had Laramie Tunsil, and that was it. They needed more elite talent. So moving up, they gave up a lot, yes. But what other people forget about that trade, and this was the other story in camp, I think, is they got a 4th-round pick back. That 4th-round pick, they moved up a little bit in the 2024 draft and took Kalen Bullock, safety from out of USC. Dude had 5 interceptions last year. He dropped another 3 or 4. He was absolutely nails as a rookie and really didn't even know what he was doing. And he has had a camp of all camps. There was about a 4 or 5 day string where he had an interception of different types, deep ball, intermediate, made a play on a short little curl route one day. I mean, Kalen Bullock has been tremendous. And you add him to hopefully Chauncey Gardner-Johnson can come back and be okay. He got hurt at the Greenbrier, but there's a thought he might be ready for week 1. You've got ball hawks in the back, but it really doesn't come together unless you got those 2 dudes up front. And our offense has really struggled with those 2. I think the story on the offensive side is that's a unit, and we say around here it's under construction. Nick Haley takes over as offensive coordinator. Yeah. Cole Popovich takes over as offensive line coach. There's a little bit more Erhardt Perkins, New England style offense in this offense, but it's seasoned with a little bit of LA Rams, Sean McVay stuff because Haley was out there for a couple of years. So it's going to be an interesting offense, I think, when it's all said and done, but they had to revamp the offensive line. And I know a lot of people looked at the trade of Laramie Tunsil and said, you just traded your best offensive lineman. I used to tell them, no, we traded our most talented offensive lineman. I said, but we're trying to get the best group. And I think with Laramie, you were never going to get the best group. You weren't going to get that. And so they kind of took a different stance. They drafted Ursary in the 2nd round. They've moved some pieces around, trying to find the right 5 that work. They signed Lakey Tomlinson at guard, a vet that's been around, but a good leader. I think DeMeco Ryans did not like what he saw on the offensive line the last couple of years, just from a mentality standpoint. So they had to reset that. And so in resetting that, with a new O-line coach, with a new OC, new pieces at receiver, it's going to be a work in progress on the offensive side of the ball. But I think when it's all said and done, I think Nick Haley wants to be a guy that runs the ball hard. Went outside Nick Chubb. Hopefully we'll get Joe Mixon back healthy. We won't see him this week, but hopefully he'll come back healthy for week 1. They want to run the ball. They want to hammer teams and then work play action off of that. And I think they've got some pieces to have some deep threats, but the offense is going to be up and down for a little while. There are going to be some moments and drives here that are like, yes, that's the way it's supposed to look. And then 3 and outs. It's going to be like that probably for a few weeks until they can really get settled in the offensive line, really get CJ comfortable, and really get Nick Haley comfortable calling plays. But I think those have probably been the stories. Offense, the young receivers are going to step up. Ursary has been fantastic. Defensively, yeah. Will Anderson Jr. is he's thrown on a gauntlet and just challenging everybody. So I think it's going to be a great test for him to see a couple of different tackles and what he has seen in practice and see how he fares against the Panthers tackles.
Yeah, it'll be a great test for Taylor Moton and also Iquano and some of the other backup tackles they have here. And speaking of those matchups, let's take a quick pause, come back, and talk about some of the matchups we're looking for on Thursday, then on Saturday, as the Panthers and Texans have joint practice, and then week 2 of the preseason. Talk more about that here in just a moment on Locked On Panthers. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means fantasy football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning things up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and Locked On NFL are playing on Yahoo Fantasy, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping $28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now is the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/lockedonnfl. All right, John, so you brought up some interesting things about the offensive line, and I find it also very interesting. Like, it's year 3 of CJ Stroud, year 3 of DeMeco Ryans. Bobby Slowick was a hot name last year in the coaching cycle. Unfortunately, things don't work out for him. And that's how, NFL, not for long. You can go from being a guy who's like, hey, take a job next year. No one wants you to take a head coaching job and you're out of a job down there as an OC. So hopefully for his sake, he bounces back, gets another opportunity. But wild how that happens. But it's interesting to me that this is still an offense kind of under construction when you would think in year 3 with the success that they've had that they would be ready to take off and be potential, and I know it's the AFC, but potential Super Bowl contenders with CJ Stroud and the talent that they have skill position-wise on an offense, but offensive line-wise. Like, I know it was a struggle for y'all last year, and that's really interesting to me because for Carolina, they struggled defensively because Derek Brown, he wasn't out there last year, played one game. Like, if you don't have one of the best defensive tackles in football, you're going to have a tough time winning football games, as we saw last year. Even if Jaycee Horn, who I think has been very underrated because of the injuries he's had at corner, he's an excellent player. Now they have both of those guys, but they brought in Bobby Brown III from LA to help out with the run. They brought in Turk Wharton from Kansas City. This is a remade defensive line going up against what looks like a remade offensive line. At least to me, like, that would be the thing I'm the most interested to see play out on Thursday, then also on Saturday, provided that Houston also plays their starters.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't know yet, which starters will play. My guess is that you'll see at least a series of the starters.
Okay.
I would think that's my gut telling me that. Kind of had a feeling that we wouldn't see him against Minnesota, and that was right on. So I think this, of anything that I'll have my eyes on, I think that's it. I was talking to the voice of the Texans, Mark Vandermeer. We were talking about this on our radio show, and the one thing I brought up are the names you just brought up, and how does our interior look against that Panthers interior? It's a different front. The Texans are more a 4-man front, Panthers more a 3-man front, but obviously, the amount of nickel and dime that are played, you can get in 4-man, rush looks and things like that. But I think it's going to be good work for that interior. And it's been interesting how the offensive line has changed just in training camp. We went to training camp and we looked at one group, and Titus Howard, who is the most tenured offensive lineman we have, was at guard. And like, okay, well, this is what he played at the end of last year. Okay, Titus Howard's at guard. And Cam Robinson left tackle and Ariante Airstreet right tackle. All right, let's see how this looks. And so they went with that look. We can fly to the Greenbrier. All of a sudden, Titus Howard's back out to right tackle. Ursery went over to left, and they switched a couple of guards inside. So they still haven't found the 5 that they really want to have. I think they're circling this group they have that probably will start, all things considered, on Thursday. Hopefully they all stay healthy, can play a series on Saturday. But I think they like the look of Titus Howard at right guard or right tackle. And they liked Ariante Airstreet, who has played left tackle his whole career. He only played a year in high school. So all he's ever known is playing left tackle. So you could see things over right tackle, not so natural. But at left tackle, yeah, he got beat every now and again by Will and Daniil, but everybody's going to.
Right.
So the one thing that's helped this offensive line is they have faced these absolute dogs on the defensive line. They've faced Will and Daniil. I think our interior defensive line is underrated. It's more the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and they give the inside some issue. But I've seen the offensive line get better, and that to us is the most important thing, because we know it's not going to be perfect week 1. We know it's not going to be perfect against the Panthers, but we just want to see those guys get physical and get a body on a body and stay on it. Last year we had guys that we had Laramie Tunsil, Shaq Mason, Kenyon Green. We had first rounders, guys they signed a lot and gave a lot of money to, but they were 5 independent contractors, and that ain't gonna fly. And we talked about it all offseason after Laramie was traded. Like, man, we'd rather have 5 workman-like dudes that work together as opposed to one all-pro superstar and 4 other guys that are kind of trying to do their thing, and Laramie's doing his own thing. And it was just time for that to change. DeMeco wanted a different vibe on his offensive line, if I use, kind of a Gen Alpha phrase. He wanted the vibes to be better. So I think that was one of the reasons, people just didn't understand a Tunsil trade. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, it didn't surprise me at all. But I live in the building, so I see everything.
Yeah, that's different.
To a degree. So I kind of knew that it was going to happen. And there were a lot of reasons that went into it. But I think the vibe of the offensive line was not right last year. And so they made a lot of changes to it, and we'll see how that group works together. But to me, the story of this team is going to be told with those 5 guys up front, how healthy they stay, how effective they are together, providing protection for CJ. And lastly, and Julian, I'm going to say this, and I know it's going to sound weird. I just want them to know what the hell they're doing, because there were games last year where it was evident they didn't know what they were doing. And I think the Green Bay game was a perfect example of that. We couldn't have played better defensively against the Packers. Could not have. We got our hands on passes, interceptions. We intercepted Love 3 times. Controlled the game really with Joe Mixon running the ball. But whenever we had to drop the pass, Jeff Hafley, who'd come from college, was just teaching us lessons. And they would have a free runner on nearly every rush. And it was like, what are we doing? And it was like that kind of all year long. And the one thing I take out of the beginning of this camp is I've seen very little of that. I've seen very little free runner. I've seen very few times where the guys don't know who they're blocking. Hey, I thought you had the blitzer was here. That was what last year was. This year, it feels a lot like, did you pick him up? Yep, got him. They have time to throw. And I think that's going to end up being the key. This is a Super Bowl caliber defense. I won't lie. This is one of the best defenses I've ever seen. It's a Super Bowl caliber defense. If this offense can just get to a point where it can be consistent and score in the red zone, TJ gets time to throw, we're going to be in this mix. But if we get the same output as last year, we'll be the same, because the division's not very good. We can win a division by winning 10 games, but we'll still be a step behind the Bills, Ravens, and Chiefs. But if we can get this offense to a level where we can be, a good mix of 50-50, we've got a lot of offensive talent, and the offensive line can step up to the challenge, we'll be right in this thing. We will be a thorn in everybody's side at that point, because our defense is that good. They're a bunch of nasty SOBs on that defense this year. And if Chauncey Gardner-Johnson comes back healthy, I got a feeling this defense is going to show people across the country. It's either 1, 2, or 3 across the league for sure.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like you say, the offense just holistically, but it's the offensive line. It all starts up front. We have seen firsthand here in Carolina, last year, you don't have Derek Brown in defensive line. You give up 3,000 plus rushing yards. Should that happen? Under no circumstance. One player being out should not lead to that, but the lack of talent that they had behind him certainly showed up. In the year prior, they had a bunch of offensive line injuries, had 7 different left guards, 8 different right guards. You bring in Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt last year, and you don't see that sort of fall off. You put Austin Corbett at center, and now that entire unit comes back, and you take another step forward, and they were a cohesive unit, which does not sound like the case was down in Houston. So, that's really what the defensive line that Carolina's brought in now with Brown III, with Turk Wharton, putting him with Derek Brown, A'Shaun Robinson coming back, them going up against a new look offensive line trying to figure things out. I'm very curious to see how they perform there when every single day in practice they're going up against a unit that was together last year, that was also primarily healthy last year in 2024. Last one for you here, just as far as matchup, the Panthers wide receivers have been getting a lot of pub. Hunter Renfrow was a talk of the town the first few weeks of training camp, went down with a hamstring, and then Jalen Coker, who was an undrafted guy to Holy Cross last year, got a UDFA deal that was pretty nice in Carolina, made the initial roster, was let go, but came back, made an impact when Adam Thielen and Deontay Johnson weren't around for a period of time last year. He stood up and he's made some hell of a plays. Had a one-handed catch on Friday night. I was at camp the other day, had a couple of jump ball catches. The dude's a stud. You got Tedder McMillan from Arizona. This is a wide receiver group that I think has a ton of talent, not a lot of proven talent, because Adam Thielen's probably the most senior proven guy, but guys like Xavier Legette can be pretty good for them as well. I'm just very interested to see how they match up against Kamari Lassiter, who you mentioned, and against obviously Derek Stingley Jr., the highest paid defensive back in the history of the NFL. Just that matchup in particular, anything excites you about that?
The whole thing, all of it. I'm pumped. I was a big Ted McMillan fan. I do a lot of draft work, and he was my number 1 wide receiver. And I know people had all these other guys that were trying to put in front of Ted. I'm like, This dude makes plays. I've been watching him back his days at Servite, where he's playing with Mason Graham back in high school. And I was like, man, who is number 4? And looked him up and just been following him ever since. I think he will have tremendous matchups with both Lassiter and Stingley. I think that is going to be a really good lesson. And the thing about it is, Sting is, I mean, yeah, obviously I'm biased and I love Sting. He's the best corner in the league. I know people want to say Pat Surtain. Like, to me, Sting is that guy. When you do what he did to Tyreek Hill, and people just didn't do that to Tyreek Hill, what he did last year was just nasty. Sting, even though he's bigger than Kamari, Sting is more about matching with mirroring and footwork. Mm-hmm. Kamari is just a crazy banshee. He is going to just get all up in their receivers and physically punch. He's going to get after him physically. Kamari is, it's funny because when you talk to the DBs, they're like, man, they shake their head and they're like, man, Kamari, crazy, man. He is crazy. And he plays the game fearlessly. But to me, the guy's making year 1 to year 2 jumps. We're hoping Cade Stover did that, and he's doing that. We thought Blake Fisher, we were hoping as offensive lineman would do that. It hasn't been as good for him. CB, Kalen Bullock has definitely made that jump, but Kamari seems to have taken it to a different level. He faces Nico Collins all the time in practice. He has worked against bigger receivers. And so I think that's going to be a great matchup with Lassiter, with Leggett, McMillan. I think that's going to be a really good work for them. And then, Thielen, I hope they'll put him in the slot. And that's, if there's one thing that we still haven't on defense kind of figured out, it's exactly how we want to cover against 11 personnel. I think one thing they may look at, we got a rookie from out of USC, Jalen Smith, who has been, up and down in camp, but more up than down. Yeah. And I do think that there's a thought that Jalen can be the third corner and that they might leave Jalen outside and move Kamari inside. Because that was the original plan. They were going to draft Kamari and let him play the slot. But Kamari was so good, they're like, dude, we got to have him all the time on the field. So he's playing on the perimeter across from Stingley. And when it gets in practice, CJ has tried Lassiter because he's going to Nico, and Lassiter just shuts it down. So I think of matchups that I'm really excited about to watch. Sting and Kamari going against the Panthers receivers, I think are going to be, and I think it's tremendous work for T-Mac. It's great work for T-Mac. And, look, Leggett's only in his second year. So I think it's going to be great work for both of them against two corners that are, they come at you a little differently. And the way that Sting matches and mirrors with his footwork, he's not as handsy. And that's why I always liked him over Sauce. I thought Sauce was just going to, steal your jersey. And then, give the, incomplete signal. It's like, well, yeah, because you tackle the wide receiver and you're just daring the ref to call it. I think Sting's got the natural cover ability. So it's going to be fun. And I was always a big Jalen Coker fan coming out of Holy Cross. I was shocked that he didn't get drafted. And when he ended up in Carolina, I was like, that's a chance. I mean, this kid, he's got ball skills on ball skills. But I think this secondary has probably covered this camp about as well as I've ever seen. And I think they've got cover guys that will make the depth receivers for the Panthers get some good work too. Most normal 2s and 3s don't cover with what we have. And I think that's going to make the work for the Panthers receivers. It's going to make it valuable for those guys as well. A guy like Jaycee Horn getting some work against our 2s and 3s. That's going to be good for the rookies. So I'm excited about those matchups, probably almost even more than I would O-line, D-line, Texans O-line against Panthers D-line. But that's going to be a really fun matchup. Of course, Nico Collins against Jaycee Horn is going to be fun. Looking forward to that.
JC may not be out there because that's the one thing.
Oh, don't make me sad.
Yeah, no, that was the one thing.
Julian, don't tell me that.
Actually, because it's good that they're going against Stingley because they haven't had JC at least. Last Wednesday before joint practice, he was driving to practice against Cleveland.
Oh, that's right. He had the accident. That's right.
Yeah, and he had stitches in his left thumb. We talked to him, I guess, yesterday, and he's like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go or not. So we'll find out. I'm sure he made the trip, certainly. So you'll find out on Thursday. You'll know before I do when you're out there seeing it. So the hope is, at least, obviously Carolina wants him out there. I would love to see him get that opportunity. You would love to see him firsthand. We'll see. But at least for the Panthers receivers who have not gotten to go up against JC over the last week, and then they've kind of rotated him in and out a decent amount of time. Corey Thornton, number 31, undrafted free agent out of Louisville. That's a guy I want you to look at because he has been a dude for them, and he's been filling in whenever Horn or Mike Jackson have gone out. So that's going to be a guy who, if JC's not out there, he'll be starting with the one. So, yeah, hopefully JC is going to be there. I would expect Derek Brown to be a full participant. It wasn't last week, but not quite sure about Jaycee Horn at this point in time.
Yeah,
we definitely matchup.
Yeah, we definitely need to see Derek Brown. We need to see him for sure. Would love to see, Jaycee Horn, but as well as I do, be ready for week one. There's certain guys that you're like, just be ready for week one. We're trying to get Joe Mixon to that point. Hey, just be ready for week one. But look, when you have another team come in, I've always been a huge fan of these joint practices. Julian, I love these things because it's control. You're not going to hit the quarterback, but do it for one day because you get to day two, it's a cluster bleep because everybody's all chippy after watching film the day before and all that. You should never go 2 days or more. It should be one day, get a good 2.5 hours in, give it a day, play a preseason game, and get out of Dodge and then get ready for the next week. But I love it because I say this all the time. The NFL is kind of the biggest small league you've ever been around. Like there are guys that know guys. I mean, Bryce and CJ grew up together. Just all the different players that have, we played high school together. These guys played in college together. This coach coached him back in high school. Now he's in the NFL. It's always kind of cool. So I always like that part of joint practices. So this will be fun. It's going to be a good test for the Texans, a great test for the Panthers as well. So we're looking forward to it. And, I know the coaching staff there for the Panthers wanted some heat. They wanted to be tested. They'll be tested. Tested.
Absolutely.
No question.
And it's a good test. A good test going against a team that went to the playoffs the last couple of years, getting to look at a different offensive line, different units and all that. So I wish I could make it down there to Houston. Of course, I will not be there, but I appreciate you coming on, John. Good to catch up with you. And hope to talk to you at some point throughout the season as we look from afar how our teams are doing. And best of luck to you, man. Appreciate your time as always. Again, he's John Harris, covers the Texans, does a great job on their radio and also doing some TV work and on the sidelines throughout the season. Follow him on Twitter, X, whatever, at J Harris Football over on his socials. Does a great job again. And you just heard it. The guy knows balls. So, John, appreciate your time as always, man.
You're best, Julian. Yeah, if you don't get a chance to watch the game, you have to watch NFL Network. You're going to see and hear this ugly mugs. I'll be up in the booth for TV preseason games. So they throw me up there because I know what happens in training camp. So I get to be on TV for a little while and live high on the hog for a little bit, at least for 3 weeks in the preseason. So that'll be kind of fun. And when it's our home game, that's the game that's the broadcast ends up on NFL Network. So that's the one you'll be able to see. So wave at me and it'll be fun. Man, I wish you were down here, Julian. It'd be fun, man. We catch up, have some good barbecue down here.
That's what's killing me the most.
Yeah.
Because I'm every time I go down to Texas, like I would go to Fort Worth a decent amount of times. Went down to Goldie's. I've done Pecan Lodge. Like I get after it every time I go down to Texas. So I hate, and I've been to Franklin's down in Austin as well. So hate that I couldn't make it this time, but I'll get down there one day and we'll
man. Yeah, man, we got a few Q spots down here for sure, man. Definitely would love to hook up sometime down here, man. It would be awesome. But appreciate you having me on, man. It was great to see you again, Julian. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Take a quick pause, come back here, and wrap up the show. Most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your elite financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL. Thanks again to John Harris of the Houston Texans, a football analyst covering the team on the sidelines, also doing some radio, some TV work. As he said, he'll be there on the NFL Network broadcast of the Houston Texans local broadcast. So if you're not local in Carolina getting the Panthers feed, you'll have to watch nationally on the NFL Network and get to see John's beautiful face once again. And you just heard him. The guy knows ball, does a great job, and happy to catch up with him. Was always the go-to guy back when I was in Nashville. Anytime we want to talk Texans versus Titans, always with the John. So happy to have him on the show today. A couple of other matchups I wanted to go over that I did not go over with John. The Texans receivers versus the Panthers DBs. We don't know whether Jaycee is going to be out there on Thursday or not. Talked to him yesterday. I wasn't there, but everyone else talked to him yesterday after practice on Tuesday, and he said he feels good. He was out there running around. It's just as far as the stitches when he can get him out. When he gets him out, he can go out there and play. Is that today, on Wednesday? Is that on Thursday? We don't really know. But either way, another opportunity for Corey Thornton to show what he can do, and also for Mike Jackson and for Shaw Smith-Wade, and just to see what this unit looks like without Jaycee. And knock on wood, you don't want Jaycee to go down. He was finally healthy last season, but there have been plenty of times in his career where he has not been available. So seeing what you have in the rest of your cornerback group against Nico Collins, against Christian Kirk, and I can't believe they did this. The Texans got both Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel out of Iowa State. And Higgins, by the way, he's the reason. Well, not really him, but it's Nick Caserio, the general manager down there in Houston. But he is the player that was given the first fully guaranteed second-round contract in NFL history. That's why Nick Scorton took so long to sign here in Carolina. Jaden Higgins, Nick Caserio, they're the reason. More so Caserio and the Texans deciding, hey, let's just give this guy a boatload of money, which makes a lot of sense because he was excellent, and so was Noel up there in Ames the last couple of years under Matt Campbell. So seeing those four up against Thornton, up against Jackson, up against Shaw Smith-Wade, Shamar Bartholomew, Caleb Evans, and hopefully Jaycee Horn, really something that I'm interested to hear about. Won't be down there, but interested to hear about it and then see it play out hopefully on Saturday if Texans go out there and play their starters. Texans offensive line versus Panthers defensive line. Talked a little bit about that with John earlier, but both are new look units for the most part. Yeah, Derek Brown's back. Ashad Robinson's back. Then you got in Bobby Brown III. Also, you bring in Turk Wharton. So really, aside from Ashad, that's three new guys. Yes, Derek Brown was under contract. He's not technically a new guy, but from what we saw last year, this is a completely different unit that Carolina is going to the season with here in 2025 versus a unit that is also completely different as Larry Tunsil. He's no longer here. Kenyon Green's no longer in Houston either. Shaq Mason, he's gone. Cam Robinson, he's here now in Houston. Trent Brown's in, Laken Tomlinson, Ed Ingram, Arianti Ursary. All five of those guys are a part of a new look Texans offensive line. We got Robinson and Tomlinson, Jarrett Patterson, Titus Howard, and Ursary all rotating in there as a starting unit. So very curious to see how the Panthers defensive line goes up against that unit. I had mentioned earlier to John, every single day here in Charlotte at practice, the Panthers D-line goes up against a unit that is bringing back everybody from last year. Damian Lewis is banged up right now. He's not in there, but they're familiar with Cade Mays. They're familiar with some of these other guys that are out there on the offensive line. So this is going to be a different challenge where it's a offensive line that's trying to come together. Whereas the one in Carolina, they're just trying to take a step forward from where they were last year because they're all back. So this is a spot where you would like to see them dominate and have success, especially hearing that the Texans defensive lines had success against them, especially on the edges. So what can Princely Umanamielen and Nick Scorton do as second teamers? And then Pat Jones, the second, DJ Wonnum as well. What do they do against the Texans offensive tackles, in particular the rookie out of Minnesota, Arianti Ursary? And looking back at last season, the Texans offensive line was 27th in PFF's run block stat. Looking at ESPN, they were 31st in run block win rate. The Panthers were, as we know, god-awful against the run. But now with Derek Brown back, Ashad Robinson here, Bobby Brown III, Turk Wharton, they should be able to stop the run. No Joe Mixon. I want to hear about this Panthers defensive line dominating the interior and having a ton of success against that unit. And then lastly, the Panthers offensive tackles versus the Texans edge rushers. Arguably, Houston had the best edge rushing duo in the NFL in 2024 with Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter. They combined for 23 sacks last year, but that does not tell the entire story. Looking again at ESPN's pass rush win rate stat, Hunter was number one among edge rushers in the National Football League last season. Anderson was number 7. That was the highest combined of teammates in the NFL, according to pass rush win rate from ESPN. Looking at the Texans overall, as far as pass rush goes, number 1. The Panthers, as a pass blocking unit, did not grade out that high when it came to ESPN's pass block win rate. They were much better according to PFF, but they weren't nearly as good as they were when opening up holes and running the football. So Taylor Moton, Ike Ekwonu, those guys allowed 8 combined sacks last year. 7 of those were from Ike, only 1 from Timo. I'm very interested to see how those guys stack up in one-on-one drills and then in the game against Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter. Great test for both of those guys. 2 of them who are looking for contract. Icky, he's not up right now according to Brant Tillis, but he does see him as an emerging player, an ascending player. If that's the case, go out there and show it against Hunter and Anderson Jr. and then get paid in the offseason. And then with Taylor, if you want this to not be your last year in Carolina, which I hope is not going to be the case, go out there and show your value once again. And I'm guessing that Josh Nyman's going to get opportunities as well with the first team. Brady Christensen, let's see it overall. So those are 3 matchups I'm really looking forward to hear about and then see on Saturday as the Panthers have joint practice on Thursday, then have preseason game number 2 on Saturday down there in Houston. But that's going to wrap up this edition of the Locked On Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network, hosted by yours, Julian Council. Again, y'all subscribe or follow the show free over on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. And be sure to follow me, Julian Council, over on Twitter and Blue Sky at Julian Council, where I'm answering any questions that you have throughout the preseason and the rest of camp here in Carolina. Then starting on September 3rd on that Wednesday, the weekly Wednesday mailbag is back every single week throughout the regular season, and fingers crossed the playoffs here on Locked On Panthers. In the meantime, be safe, be happy, be whole as always and forever. Keep pounding, and I'll be back with y'all on Friday. Hopefully going to get an episode out by noon, 1 o'clock Eastern time, as again, I won't be down there on Thursday in Houston. Mike K, though, the Charlotte Observer, he has made the trip out there. He's going to join me on Friday morning. So going to record that and get that out hopefully around lunchtime, 12 or about 1 o'clock Eastern time, as I'll be in Richmond for NASCAR duty. So going to get that out there. So bear with me. We'll talk about what he saw on Thursday, preview the game coming up on Saturday. So all that coming up on Friday here on Locked On Panthers.